Hello everyone, welcome to Staking Nerd Talk episode 4. Hello Yorick, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Remy?
I'm doing awesome. Today we're gonna talk about a few topics. We'll come back to the Rocket Pool Saturn 1 update. We'll talk a lot about Fusaka, which is very close to being deployed on a few testnet. We have a lot to talk about this, including PeerDAS, BPOs, and a few other things. We'll come back to a subject that we've covered in the past, which is the hardware requirements for running a node and the different roles that we might have or we currently have with like the different people running those nodes. Some of the news with regards with the Hoodi fork, especially with the client updates. The deprecation of the staking deposit CLI tool, which is now replaced with the ethstaker-deposit-cli tool and a new execution client called Ethrex. Is that the proper pronunciation?
I'm not sure. They have like a Tyrannosaurus Rex as their mascot, so
Interesting.
Ethrex, something like that.
All right, let's start with the Rocket Pool Saturn 1. We talked about this in episode 3. And I believe they changed their new target for mainnet launch, which is now on January 19. But what's the thing that we missed or that we spoke about that was wrong last time?
Yeah, so I talked about Saturn 1 having forced exits, and I think, if I recall correctly, because I didn't go back and watch it, and that was entirely wrong. That is not how that works. I did have a description from Patches on Rocket Pool on what it actually does, and of course it is now completely gone from my screen. That's always how it works. So it's going to be from, nope, there it is. I don't want to do this from memory and get it wrong again. So with Saturn 1, so Rocket Pool right now, the way this works is it's a liquid staking token protocol, and you have an 8 ETH bond, right? So every validator you run, 8 of those ETH are your own. And when you stake RPL with their own token, then you get more RPL. Well, this has made people not super happy. They didn't fully understand why they should stake a token to just get more of that token. So with Saturn 1, 2 changes are coming. One is they're going from what they're currently calling a mini pool, which is a smart contract that handles one validator, to a mega pool. So it's the same basic idea, but now that smart contract can handle multiple validators. Makes it a lot easier for node operators, for example, to claim rewards. That's just one call instead of, say, you have 20 validators, 20 calls, you know. And the bond will be reduced to 4 ETH per validator. Any RPL staked just means that they get a higher share of the protocol revenue in ETH. So if you have RPL and you stake it, come Saturn 1 in January, instead of getting more RPL, you get more ETH. The hope is that this makes RPL more attractive as a way to earn ETH.
My only main takeaway is that now people can stake with like 4 ETH. Well, they will be able to.
They will be able to as long as they migrate to mega pools or create a mega pool. Absolutely.
And from your understanding, there's a migration path for people that are currently using the mini pool, right?
There will be a migration path, absolutely. And I would say Rocket Pool Discord for all the nitty-gritty details, but there will be a migration path from current mini pools to mega pools. This does involve an exit and entry, so hopefully the queue isn't too large at that point. At least that's my understanding. Watch us come back to do another correction at SMT 5.
and just to make this clear, the queue is not related to like the regular staking queue. It's a different queue, right?
Both. I think they're gonna have a Rocket Pool queue and it's the regular staking queue as well.
So people have to go through the regular queue, and
I believe they will have to exit the validators, and the reason is that right now these validators are all tied to the individual contracts, smart contracts, one deployment per validator, right? The mini pools. And with a mega pool, the whole idea is that a smart contract can handle multiple validators. So these validators need a new withdrawal address, which means they need to be exited and re-entered.
So depending on how many people are trying to join or exit, at the time that people want to do this migration, they might have to wait longer.
Exactly. There will be a queue for sure. Yeah. Saturn 2, sometime later in 2026, that's when they could get forced exits. There is currently a governance effort to pursue that for liquidity. Initially, that's not for liquidity. It's just for defined issues like, say, somebody's been offline forever and not coming back. It's bad for the protocol, so they're going to do a forced exit to get that ETH back in and redistributed, right? If there have been some node operators that literally have been off for 6 months or longer, and there's no way of getting them of going after them, right? So that's with Saturn 2. Currently not yet for liquidity, but they have a grant going to figure out how they could do it for liquidity, which is of course a big question mark, who gets exited. And it also, importantly though, as you say, I took away, it takes 4 ETH. Saturn 2 gives them bond curves. So the initial bond curve is going to be the first 2 validators are 4 ETH bonds, and the rest have 1.5.
Interesting.
That's going to get interesting as we get into the next topics here, because all of this stuff hangs together. This does have a point about how quickly you become a supernode in Rocket Pool.
Yeah, because this ties in with our next subject, which is Fusaka and PeerDAS. PeerDAS is like the main show of Fusaka. Fusaka includes a bunch of other stuff, including BPOs, which are the blob parameter only forks, which enables the protocol to upgrade the number of blobs on the network without having to do like the usual hard fork, which is quite involving for everyone. But yeah, let's get started with PeerDAS. Let me just give you my own understanding of PeerDAS. PeerDAS is this next step in trying to scale blobs. Right now we have 6 blob as a target on the network with a maximum of 9. So as the network include more than 6 blob, the fees increases, and if not, they decreases, so that the equilibrium is 6 blob per block. But with PeerDAS, we will have some kind of distributed layer where nodes will not be required to host or store all the blobs all the time, depending on how much ETH you're staking, right? So if you're a small staker with only like 32 ETH, you will not need to store a large amount of blobs. But if you're a very large staker, like some of these institutional staking operation, you will need to be carrying a lot more blob, a lot more of the weight of not only storing this on disk, but also sharing this on the P2P layer. Is that your understanding as well?
That is my understanding as well, yes. So yeah, blobs are how layer 2s post some data to the Ethereum chain. They used to do this with call data, and it stayed around forever, and that was expensive. And now, since, I want to say since Spectra, but maybe before. I lose track of these hard forks. It's very embarrassing. So since we introduced blobs, these things are now ephemeral. They stick around for 18 days. Layer 2s can cheaply host their data. That's why we have sub-cent transactions on layer 2s. And Fusaka aims to scale that further. I'm looking right now for the BPO fork. Do you have that in front of you?
Not on that screen, no.
Well, I'll find it as we talk. So what's your take? How did the Fusaka upgrades on Holeshki and on Sepolia go?
So I haven't been following the hard fork on Holeshki or Sepolia. I know Holeshki went well, but in my mind, Holeshki's already dead. So so I didn't follow that one closely. But I've seen that it went well on Sepolia as well. So hopefully everyone who's testing all of these dApps can give us a bigger idea of like, is this going well? Have the clients been updated successfully? Is there any troubles before we go forward with not only the Hoodi fork, but also the fork coming up on mainnet?
Right. So as you say, right, a node doesn't have to carry all of the blobs all the time, with the caveat that we'll get to here, which is what we're working towards. So a normal operator shouldn't see a big problem with normal operation day to day, but it differs a little bit when we get to block production. So that's something we need to talk about. And it's linear. As you get more ETH staked, that is talking to your Ethereum node. So you have your consensus layer, your execution layer. Basically, the consensus layer looks at how many validators are using me for attestations, or how much ETH in those validators. That doesn't really count the validators, it counts the ETH. If that ETH is 4,096, that'd be 128 old school validators or 2 completely maxed out new ones, type 2, right?
Yep.
Then you are a super node, which means you have to have all of it all the time. And until then, it's kind of linear. So for most people, not a big deal.
If we want to get
Here's
technical, like I believe there's 128 columns for
Yes.
all of these blobs to be shared, and each of these columns are independent as they're being shared on the P2P layer on the network. But if you're like staking with one validator or like 32 ETH, the old type of validator, you will only need to be carrying 8 of these columns, like so 130,
Correct.
32
second, yeah,
second, yeah.
Second of it, yeah. So you had mentioned BPO forks, right? Blob parameter only forks.
Yep.
These are scheduled in the software that you're running. They are hard forks, so you do want your client to follow along. BPO1 is going to increase the blob count limit from currently 6.9, as you said, to 10.15. And then BPO2, which might be as early as January, to 14.21. Now, BPO3, 4, and 5 have not been scheduled, nor their size. They want to see how this behaves before they do. But there will be another client update to schedule BPOs 3, 4, and 5. So that's the current plan.
The actual impact of like the stakers who are watching us right now is you might be running low on disk space, as these will potentially increase your disk usage. Remember that blobs are stored on your disk for 18 days. And so if there's more blob, potentially you have to store more. Unless you're sticking with a low amount of ETH, like we mentioned, you might not need to store all of these blobs. So disk space is going to be an issue for some people, but bandwidth might also become one, right?
Right, absolutely. So disk space, I'm looking, so there is a blog post, which I'm sure we're going to link, from ETHPanda Ops, where you can say, I'm a solo staker, I'm a small operator, I'm a medium operator, I'm a super node. What does that mean for me? So the disk space isn't too bad, even at 320 ETH, which is about I think beyond that's probably not a ton of solo operators who are bigger than that, right? There's some. It's under 60 gig at BPO2 max. What that means for BPO5 max We don't quite know yet because that hasn't been set. So when we say max, it means when it's truly full, right? When BPO2, I think it was 21 maximum, when all 21 blobs are full.
And this just to be clear, this depends on like how much layer 2s are using blobs, and like if the blob is not fully used, like if this capacity is not fully used, the amount of the space and the amount of bandwidth that are people are expecting to be using might not be these values.
Right. So I want to talk, if I can, about bandwidth and specifically local block building.
Go ahead.
So when you're building a block today, you have two ways of doing that. One, you're doing it through a relay, typically MEV boost or commit boost. So you're going to the relay, you're saying, go tell me which block pays the best. That's the one you're going to sign just the header for, and then that gets published. You don't actually need to have all the bandwidth to publish that on time. The builder takes care of that. You just need to sign the header on time. Great. Or you can build locally. This could be because you're just not convinced about MEV and you're not running an MEV boost or a commit boost sidecar and you're not using relays. Or it could be because you have a min bit set. If you recall, at one point it was a recommendation, set your min bit to 0.05. Or because your validator client has what's known as a proposer boost setting, or sometimes also builder boost setting, depends on the client what they call it, which says unless the builder pays at least 10% more than local building, build local. Great for censorship resistance, right? Here's the trouble. So we're looking at BPO2 target and BPO2 max. The bandwidth you would need for target or max, again, your mileage will vary because you don't know how many blobs are actually in the block you're building. Right now, a priori, you'll find that out when you're building it. So, Fusaka BPO2 target, 75 megabits per second up. BPO2 max, 112 megabits per second up. And that's just BPO2. We're not even at BPO3, 4 or 5 yet. This means that for a lot of home stakers, this starts to be out of reach. If you are the kind of guy that has symmetric gigabit available to you, more power to you. You know, use it, you can build locally.
I've heard about the new settings though, like the max blob settings that some consensus client might be implementing.
That is not in the protocol as far as I know.
But potentially,
I don't think that made it in.
Potentially, like clients could decide to limit the amount of blobs that they include in their blocks, right?
Could. We'll see whether that happens, right? For now, I think you should go with the theory that that doesn't exist necessarily. We'll see as we go.
Because that could be like one way for like small stakers with limited bandwidth to still be able to be local building their blocks and be like in their terms of like bandwidth consumptions be there.
Yeah. The worry here is that in some places in the US, for example, you don't get more than 35 megabit up. Not for money or anything. You can't have it. You know, even in reasonably large cities, and that's not going to be enough to build locally anymore.
I've heard that Berlin in Germany is pretty bad as well. So it's not just in the US.
I'm sure, right? So and here where I am, I've got 200 megabit up, a gig down. I could narrowly still build with BPO2. I am not expecting I could still build locally with BPO5.
So the trade-off that people will have to ask themselves or maybe tweak their configuration is, do they want to keep trying to local build their blocks, or do they want to externalize all the block building to the MEV relays, right?
Correct. Yes. If you always build externally, then this isn't an issue, right? If you don't have enough bandwidth and you're building locally, you're just going to miss the block. You're going to get it orphaned because you're too late. That's it, right?
And I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of monitorings in terms of these BPO forks like how much the actual bandwidth requirements are increasing over time, and like there will be a lot of discussions around these. So
For sure.
hopefully it won't just get pushed by people, right?
Yeah, so actual, of course, depends on how heavily the blobs get used, right? So even if you're being told, oh, on average, it's just 20 megabit up, you're fine, right? And you get a big block with a lot of blobs in it, you're not fine, right? And so I would say planning for max is prudent, just so that no matter what comes your way, you're good, right?
Totally.
This would mean 150 megabit up-ish to have some room with BPO2, and then to be determined for 3, 4, and 5. Yeah, maybe there will be a way to limit blobs. Last time I asked, there wasn't consensus that this would be a good feature to have, and I didn't see anybody talking about actually implementing it. But maybe you know more by now.
No, I don't know much about this. I still want to talk about people that are running just RPC nodes, or like nodes that are not validating. We talked about these 128 columns for sharing blobs. If you're running just an RPC node, you'll only have to carry 4 of those. So it should still be quite light to run an RPC node.
Yes, this is true. Until you get into layer 2s, this is where it gets fun. What everybody woke up to with Sepolia was, well, hold up a second. My layer 1 RPC is feeding a layer 2 RPC. And the layer 2 RPC wants to see blobs. And to see blobs, I have to be a supernode.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So it really depends on your use case.
It does depend on your use case. Supernodes would need a 4 terabyte disk, which they typically have if they're RPC nodes. It's not a big deal. And so what these RPC runners have found is I have to force the client with it's a consensus layer client with a parameter to be a supernode so that my layer 2 RPC can connect and see the blobs.
And we can expect all of these clients to have settings or configuration options to...
they all have a setting to do that.
To do that, right?
Well, they should. I now realize I don't actually know what the setting for Kaplan is for Aragon, but I know it for all others. So all others have it. Kaplan probably does. It just hasn't been mentioned anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it'll make sense for them to add it, so we can expect them to have it as well.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Awesome.
Okay,
was there anything else we wanted to talk about Fusaka?
I think we'll come back to the Hoodi timeline later.
Well, let's talk about the hardware requirements. There's this new EIP. Well, it's not new, but it's been recently created, the EIP 7870. That talks about the hardware requirements for running a node. So if you read the EIP, you'll see that there's actually different roles, which is great because it kind of like bring us into this new discussions where people should expect there being different kind of nodes, right, on the network. Initially, it was just people running their execution client, and then with the merge, we added the consensus client. Well, before the merge, with the creation of the beacon node chain, and then now we're adding even more roles. But if you read the EIP, you'll see that there's like this full node role, which is just running a node without any staking. There's this attestation role where you are staking and only attesting, not building block. And then this third role, which is attesting and locally building all your blocks. And they have requirements that are much higher than what we used to recommend. What's your take on this?
That was going to be my question to you. So the requirements are 8 cores, 16 threads, 64 gig of RAM, and a 4 terabyte NVMe disk. So what's your take? If somebody is running now happily with 2 or 4 cores and 32 gig and a 2 terabyte disk, should they run out and buy new hardware?
That's a very good question. I mean, if you want to future-proof your device, or like if you're building a new one, you should probably follow exactly what they're recommending there. But like today, if you're running a lower powered device with like 32 gig of RAM or even a 2 terabyte SSD, you might still be fine, and you might still be able to wait a little longer because as we know, these hardware components, like, they just get cheaper over time. But eventually you should prepare yourself that you'll have to migrate. If you haven't migrated to like a 4 terabyte SSD, you should definitely look into doing that sooner rather than later. In terms of like CPU, I understand that they want to give themselves like a somewhat of a buffer, because we can expect more processing power to be needed in the future. In terms of bandwidth, I love that they actually put a number of on like bandwidth requirements, because the numbers that we had before were kind of fuzzy, but now it's way more precise.
Right. So the interesting part to that is that the Fusaka supernode requirements are not in this EIP, and they're currently discussing whether and how they can put them into the EIP. Has to do with what kind of EIP it is and whether it can be edited after the fact, etc., yada, yada. They basically have to make this a living document, which it currently might not formally be. So that's going to be interesting. I have a slightly different take on the 2 terabyte disk thing. I think with history expiry, people can just chill on that and keep running that if that's what they have. There's no need to run out right this very second, not even sooner rather than later. Unless, of course, you have enough stake connected that you become a supernode, then you absolutely need that 4 terabyte drive. So enough stake connected to become a supernode. We're coming back to Fusaka now with hardware. I did the math on Rocket Pool, Saturn 2, and other protocols like Lido CSM. It's going to be similar, right? If you have 197 ETH on Saturn 2, you're a supernode.
Wow, that's as low as that amount, right?
As low as that, 197, right? That sounds like a lot, but it's not that much in the end. You know, it's like 6 validators worth of, or old ones, right? On the one hand, it's a lot, you know, and in money as well, but on the other hand, there are plenty of solo stakers who have that.
So it's a big trade-off, because like if you want to participate in this ecosystem, you have to do this trade-off where you'll need more bandwidth and potentially more disk space.
Yes.
Compared to like if you were just running this as a solo validator, right?
Correct. Absolutely true. So we don't know yet what the targets for BPO 3, 4, 5 look like. Like for BPO 2 max, it's an extra 600 gigabyte of storage, up to, right? But you don't want to be not ready and then find out you're running out of space. So you want to have that extra space. BPO 3, 4, 5, we don't know yet what that looks like, but I'm thinking it's possible that even at a quarter of this size, you're not a supernode yet. Once we scale up into BPOs, your 2 terabyte drive isn't going to be enough anymore. And if you're a solo staker, okay, I mean, whatever, that's a quarter is 1024 ETH. You can afford a 4 terabyte drive. Thank you.
Which is why I mentioned that people should be looking into potentially upgrading soon.
You're absolutely right with that. With Rocket Pool, a quarter of the way with Saturn 2 is 53 ETH. That's not a lot anymore.
No.
Right? So yeah, you're absolutely right there. Yes, I do agree with you. After just saying maybe not so soon, it depends on how you're running your node. If you're kind of leveraging the LST protocols and you have a lot more ETH connected than you actually own yourself, then yes, you may need a 4 terabyte drive rather sharpish sometime mid-26 or so.
So you talked about like keeping this as a living document, but isn't the point of like trying to define requirements, trying to set them in stone for the future.
If only it worked that way. And now Fusaka comes around and says, "Oh, you're a supernode. You need all this bandwidth to make a block."
Right? Because like I'm thinking like this is to give everyone like a base to work with, right?
Yes. And I think the CPU, RAM, and storage base is pretty damn good. It's the bandwidth that is probably gonna move around a bit.
My guess is that they'll just keep adding roles, right? So we will set in stone like the full node without staking role as being this value, but like there will be more roles added in the future with different requirements. That would be one way to keep this as a living document.
Probably yes. And also, we'll have to see whether this comes to pass now with Glamsterdam. I am now rooting hard for Fossil. I was on the fence about it before. Now I'm really rooting for it. I want that team to be ready for Glamsterdam and get it in. Fossil is the fork choice inclusion list, so it forces transactions to be in, even when you're using an external builder. It means we can be okay with having fewer people who can local build and still get censorship resistance, right? That's the thing we're losing as people don't have enough bandwidth to local build anymore, is the censorship resistance.
I agree. Yeah. So Fossil it would be a great inclusion eventually.
That they will make it into Glamsterdam. Yeah. That would be amazing.
All right, we wanted to talk about the Hoodi fork and potentially the client versions that will be needed. I'll just let you have that one.
The Hoodi fork is on October 28th, so a little less under 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
Yeah, something like that. We of course expect it to go swimmingly well, because Valeshki and Sepolia did, and then we'll have the mainnet fork at some point after that. The funny part is I don't think all core devs have actually said yet when the mainnet fork will be. They want to see all of the testnet forks to go through,
which is
everywhere
very usual as the way to do it, right?
It is very usual, but everywhere you look online, there's already a specific slot and date and time for mainnet given. So take that with a grain of salt if you see it.
I mean, is it usually like 2 or 3 weeks after the last testnet that they plan?
30 days.
30 days.
30 days minimum. And that's because the layer 2s need time for their governance.
Yeah. And so we can expect this to be like, if Hoodi goes well, at the end of November, we should expect the mainnet fork to be planned for.
I expect that the mainnet fork earliest can come like December 3rd. And maybe a couple weeks after that, we'll see. That would give them enough time after the Hoodi fork to around November 3rd decide that all is well, and they can schedule, and then December 3rd it forks.
As a reminder, As a reminder, if you're running a node on Hoodi, make sure to update your clients, because you won't be following the chain if you're not. Depending on how you installed everything, you might need to use like some of the preview releases for some of these clients, because like not all the client team release this as a stable release, so just have to look at it.
Yeah, and we'll have a link. There's a Reddit post where I'm tracking these client releases. It talks about my own project ethdocker, but the release doesn't matter for how you run it. If you run this in ethpillar or in your ethwizard or in Rocket Pool, or just straight up with a Somer ESAT guide, as a large amount of people are, the versions are the same, right? It just differs a little bit on how you get the version. And as you say, some of these things are an alpha or beta or release candidate for the testnet still.
So the staking deposit CLI was deprecated, and now we are left with the ethstaker-deposit CLI. There's nothing much to say about this. We're glad that we are being trusted with maintaining this tool. Yorick, you are helping with this. I'm also helping. We've got Valifar which
Yep.
you guys might have seen before, helping with the tool. Anything else?
Yeah, congratulations. No, and the bulk of the work has been done by you and Valifar, you know, and I've been doing a little bit around the edges, mostly with, if I recall correctly, it was the redoing the click integration because it broke with the new version. So
We
like
also had the
dependency management.
Yeah, we also had Nixo help us with some of the documentation. So this has
Absolutely
been like
amazing.
a team effort. So hopefully
Very
we can
much
keep
has been
this
a team
tool
effort.
going around for a while.
That's the idea, to keep it going, keep it maintained. We should also say, so when we released this last year, we had a security audit done after the staking-deposit-cli hadn't gotten one in like 3 years. The intent is to do this yearly, so we're going to have another security audit upcoming at the end of this year or early January, and then keep doing this on a yearly cadence so that we don't get into a situation again where the security audit is stale.
Good point. Yep. Ethrex, what do you know about it? I haven't even heard about it before.
I know very little about it. It's a execution layer client built in Rust. It wants to be both an execution layer client for layer 1 as well as for specifically for layer 2. That's probably their value prop here. It's very lightweight in its code. They've made some very specific choices. For example, when you look at all other execution layer clients, they can expire pre-merge history, right? Ethrex said, no, well, that's not what we are. We are not a client that needs to run as an archive or an RPC. Use any of the others for that, meaning a historical RPC, right? You can use it as an RPC for sending transactions, etc., but not historical. So it plain does not execute pre-merge transactions at all. It cannot have pre-merge. Because of some of these choices, their code is fairly lightweight, small. They've been rapidly releasing every week, sometimes with breaking changes. So, you know, it's certainly something to try on testnet before you put this on mainnet.
Are you running the client yourself?
Not yet. I am actually, I don't want to resync all the time. I have other things to do. I need to play Diablo 4.
Good point.
I'm waiting for them to, with the next after that release, they're gonna introduce path-based state storage, the same thing that Geth has, or similar, right? And then I want to sync one on mainnet and document the sync time and database size and how quickly it grows. All of that has been changing so rapidly in the last 3 weeks to a month that documenting it would have been pointless because it changes with the next release. So I think with path-based, it's probably which is the next release, it's probably at a point where I can reasonably test it and then put that into my documentation as to the resource requirements, and it hopefully doesn't change drastically the week after, though it may.
And I'm guessing you will be including that client in fdocker as well.
Already done. It's supported. People can seek that. Ethrex is supported in ethdocker as an execution layer client, but understand that while they currently call this a version 3, that is a very aggressive versioning they're doing. You could also reasonably call this a version 0.3.
It's pretty much still like in a beta phase, right?
They say it's not its release, but you know, they've been rapidly iterating and doing things like we'll release every week, and then we're not promising that you don't have to resync every week. So
they're not afraid to break stuff if that's one way to see it.
They're not afraid to break stuff at this point in time. Yes. So you know, operation code base, for all I know, it's GA quality. I have no idea, but operationally, you'll have to treat it like a beta because you'll be resyncing a lot.
Awesome. Well, that's all we had on the agenda for today. If you guys have any topics that you'd like to suggest, we're very open to talking about anything staking related. Did you have anything else before we leave?
Have you ever listened to Car Talk on NPR?
No.
No, well, because I was going to make this joke and say, don't stake like Remy.
Why?
They always ended it with, don't drive like my brother. And then
Oh,
the
I
other guy
see.
would say, don't drive like my brother.
I see. Awesome. Well, thanks for
Well, that didn't
joining.
work.
Yeah. I'm not great with jokes like these. Well, thanks for joining, and we'll see you guys next time.